Salutations! Before we begin this video, I'd like to announce that I have set up a Subscribestar page. Unless otherwise specified, 100% of all contributions will go towards the purchase of books and research materials that will allow for more interesting and informative content on this channel. Thank you for your consideration. Now on to our main subject. According to the Anglo-Saxon historian Bede the Venerable, Easter is named after Eastermonath, or Easter month, when sacrifices were given to the goddess Estra. A number of politically motivated people have attempted to accuse Bede of inventing this, though none can explain what could possibly have motivated him to do so. Our friend in the Third Academy, who previously enlightened us about Yule, has been investigating additional information regarding this holiday, and I would like to share with you what he has uncovered so far. The first day of summer is one of the big three yearly celebrations of the Germanic peoples that included a blood sacrifice. These are attested, for example, in the Ynglinga saga. Odin set laws in his land that had formerly been upheld by the Aesir. Then they had to sacrifice in the beginning of winter for a good year, in the middle of winter for a good crop, and a third time in the summer. That was a victory sacrifice. We shall discuss the blood sacrifice that was celebrated in the first day of summer. This sacrifice is more commonly known as Sigurblot, victory sacrifice, and less commonly as Varsblot, spring sacrifice, or Summermal, first day of summer. The first day of summer and its sacrifice take place at the beginning of summer in the bipartite division of the year. In the quadripartite division of the year, this is the middle of the spring season. The date itself is identical, and it is the fourth full moon after the new moon after the winter solstice as demonstrated by Andreas Nordberg. Alternatively, the same date can be described as the first full moon after the new moon after the spring equinox, as demonstrated by Andreas Saltner. We shall lay out relevant literary sources that testify this is so. In the spring following, King Granmar went to Uppsala in order to sacrifice, as was the custom in the beginning of summer, that this peace might last. To tell the truth, sire, if you want the facts, in the interior of Trondheim district nearly all the people are pure heathen in their belief, even though some few there are baptized. It is their custom to perform a sacrifice in the autumn to welcome winter, a second at midwinter, and a third in summer to welcome its arrival. While heathendom still prevailed, he was accustomed to have 3 sacrifices held every year, one at the winter nights, another in the midwinter, and the third in summer, and when he had adopted Christianity, he continued to have feasts in the same way. So he had a great banquet in the autumn for friends, then a Yule feast in winter to which he invited a great many people, and a third feast he held at Pashka, and there too he had many guests, and in this way he continued as long as he lived. From the above-mentioned saga passages, one may get a different impression of the nature of the celebration depending on who observes it. The ordinary people celebrate the welcoming of summer and sacrifice for happiness in the passages from Vatnsdæla saga and Egil's saga, while the kings sacrifice for peace and for victory in the other sources. This may also be why we see different names for this observation. The Indiculus Superstitionum et Paganiarum, Small Index of Superstitions and Paganism, is a short list of practices banned in Old Saxony after the introduction of Christianity that were deemed pagan. On this list we read, concerning the waning of the moon, which they call Winkeluna. Although quite enigmatic at first, Winkeluna could very well be translated as victory moon. If so, then this could be evidence that the Saxons celebrated a victory sacrifice on a full moon as well, and then on its subsequent waning. It would testify that this festival was primarily for victory, just as we find in the Scandinavian sources. That the first day of summer is held on the fourth full moon after the new moon after the winter solstice also becomes apparent from Bede's De Temporum Ratione. Hence they called the month in which the winter season began Winterfileth, a name made up from winter and full moon, because winter began on the full moon of that month. Establishing that this is in fact the same event that was called Winter Nights, Veternatta, in Scandinavia, we also read, but originally they divided the year as a whole into 2 seasons, summer and winter, assigning the 6 months in which the days are longer than the nights to summer, and the other 6 to winter. We may proceed to designate the first day of summer on a full moon exactly 6 months later, and this date falls on the full moon of Eastermonath, of which Bede says, Eastermonath has a name which now means Paschal month, and which was once named after a goddess of theirs called Aestra, in whose honour feasts were celebrated in that month. Now they designate that Paschal season by her name, calling the joys of the new rite by the time-honoured name of the old observance. The identity of this mysterious goddess Aestra has been theorised since the time of Jacob Grimm, who speculated she was a dawn goddess based on the etymology of her name. Others have desperately tried to prove she was a fabrication of Bede in order to defend the English Easter as a tradition of purely Christian origin. Philip Shaw demonstrates that Aestra was indeed a goddess, albeit under this name worshipped only locally in England, Frisia and Francia based on linguistics and archaeology of her Romanised cult. We find parallels of such a goddess in other Indo-European branches, most notably the Vedic Ushas, a dawn goddess, or the Slavic Vesna, a goddess of spring and dawn, Greek Eos and Roman Aurora. Arguments for the identification of Aestra with the Scandinavian goddess Freya have also been proposed. Understanding the festival of Aestra as a celebration of the first day of summer also supports and gives credibility to the theory that she was viewed as a dawn goddess, because the year cycle may be seen as reflective of the cycle of the day. First day of summer would be corresponding to daybreak, and thus it would make sense to invoke a goddess who presides over this astronomical event, whether on a microcosmic or macrocosmic level. Bede says they honoured Aestra with a feast. We may assume the feasting followed after an animal sacrifice, as was the common Germanic custom. A book from 1709 by Johann G. Leukfeld uses the name Ostar and links her to Astarte, Venus and Luna. He says the pagan Easter fires are dedicated to her, and there was a statue of her somewhere in the Harz mountain area. Yes, it is also believable that the Saxons venerated the goddess Astarte, or Ostara, as she is known, so much appreciated due to the beauty and fertility, which they hoped to receive from her, thus venerating Venus and Luna, foremost venerated at Gandersheim towards morning on the Osterberg, Easter Mountain, as they call this moderately elevated mountain covered with woodland, which might have previously been venerated as dedicated to this goddess as a holy grove or bosque, where the mountain meets the Jungfernkloster Brunshausen, a monastery, in which goddess the so-called Easter fire has its origin, among other things, which up until a few years ago was lit by the locals every year on Easter Eve as a still practiced heathen custom on this mountain, but which now is abolished, as commendable for Christian virtue. And it has been said that this goddess itself stood 3 miles underneath Gandersheim near Osterode, a city in the Principality of Grubenhagen, which is also said to derive its name from her. And no, Facebook users, Ostara is not Ishtar. Just because two things sound slightly similar to a layman doesn't mean they are the same thing. Aestra, or Ostara, is an Indo-European goddess whose name is derived from the Proto-Indo-European word for the dawn, Hausos, from which we also get the word east. Ishtar, or Astarte, is an alternative name for Inanna, an Afro-Asiatic goddess who presides over war and sex, and has nothing to do with the sun. Not being a linguist or having access to modern linguistic research, Mr. Leukfeld is very much mistaken here. Anyway, that's all we have for now. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.
Oh, do not tell the priest a plight, or he would call it a sin. But we've been out in the woods all night a-conjuring summer in, and we bring you news by word of mouth, good news for cattle and corn. Now is the sun come up from the south with oak and ash and thorn. Sing oak and ash and thorn, good sirs, all of a midsummer's morn. England shall bide till judgment tide by oak and ash and thorn.